Hey there, we're live. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Mitch Goldberg. You're watching my live stream, Be the Boss of Your Money. We're talking about the debt ceiling. Who owns the national debt? Is it all China? Because you're going to hear all kinds of weird, funky things. And I've got the best thing I've said to a client in quite some time. I like the way it was relatable. And this is going to be a video, so I'm just going to do a really, just a quickie over here.
That's what she said.
The lack of maturity. I'm sorry. Can't take me anywhere. I know. So let's just roll the intro. We're going to go right through this, and here we go. Stick around. It's going to be really good. We're going to be off in 5 minutes. All right, we're back. So just real quick, we're just getting started. Excuse me. We're just getting started. Now, if you want to know what your risk number is, because we'll have a risk number, like, well, what's your risk tolerance? I've got a really good way to measure that. It's a really graphic interface kind of way to do it. It's very quick, very easy. You just send me an email at mgoldberg@ClientFirstStrategy. Again, mgoldberg@ClientFirstStrategy, or you can just check out my website, Client First Strategy. You need to know what your risk tolerance is. And I've got a really good way to assess that. So what you do is just email me. I'll email you back a quick questionnaire. It takes it doesn't even take a minute, but it's the way it works compared to other risk questionnaires. This one blows me away. It's really incredibly accurate. You take a look at it. I'll give you the risk number. It's yours for free, and we'll talk about that if you want. Then the key is, well, what's the risk of your investment portfolio? Are they matched properly or are they not? That's really important to know. So this is how we get started. But if you want to get started with your risk number, send me an email, mgoldberg@ClientFirstStrategy. And while you're watching, if you have any questions for me, hit me up in the comments. Any words of wisdom, words of encouragement are always appreciated. If you don't mind, give us a thumbs up on whatever platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, wherever you're watching. It helps us get the show around. It helps your contacts see that you're watching quality financial content. That's what this is all about. Making you better with your money, okay? Being the boss of your money. Who's in control? You or your money? It's pretty easy to see the money, or lack thereof, take control of us. All right, so first thing is this, national debt. We have more talk today about the debt ceiling, which it was believed that the deadline date could be June 1st. First it was July, then tax receipts came in lower at the Treasury Department through the IRS, right? The Internal Revenue Service is part of the Treasury Department. But tax receipts come in lower, so Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, former chairperson of the Federal Reserve, says the drop dead date is June 1st. All right, well, then we started to get nervous. Congressional leaders and the president met early last week. They met last Tuesday. They canceled their meeting for this past Friday, said more negotiations between our underlings needed to take place over the weekend. Joe Biden says he's confident a deal will come out. McCarthy, House Speaker McCarthy says, I don't think they're taking this too seriously or seriously enough. But Janet, then the talk is, well, maybe it's not really June 1st. We have a little bit more time. We've got more tax receipts coming in, and we're not going to default on the national debt right away. There are other things that we're going to stop paying, like federal workers. By the way, federal workers have to go to work even if they're not getting paid. They will be made whole, by the way. They will get their money. All right, just they could go a few weeks without getting their money, which kind of sucks for them, and it's just not fair. But that's part of the there's risks and rewards of being a federal employee, right? Just like everything else. So anyway, but after the market was up today. General averages were up today, and it was just a calm, pretty quiet day today, actually, kind of ho-hum. And the feeling is that the Fed is starting raising rates. They might cut by the end of the year. Raphael Bostic, I think one of the Fed governors from Atlanta, said, no, I don't think we're done. I don't think we're going to cut this year. But you get different Fed governors with different opinions, and it just depends on what information they get. Like they said, they're data dependent. and I don't like making decisions based on being data dependent. My data point is like, yeah, in 15, 20 years, come talk to me. We're long-term investors. Even if you're retired, we're still long-term investors. Okay. It's just that the money you need for your near-term obligations presumably is already in cash equivalents or something very stable, right? Anyway, we how do I say this? You're gonna, so that's the debt ceiling now. So the news after the market is Janet Yellen comes out and says, "No, really, we think June 1st could be the drop dead date." So we don't know what the hell's going on. We think congressional leaders can meet tomorrow, and now Biden's using words like, "Well, we'll see. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about that." He's kind of throwing out words that indicate that, yeah, he's willing to negotiate a little bit. If you guys will come up a little bit, we'll come down a little bit, and that's how negotiations start. Listen, I was talking to a friend of mine today about the economy and the market, and this is why, this is why we never agree on a debt ceiling and getting the budget in place. You're like, we had all year to do this. Why didn't we do this? Even if we come to an agreement, debt resolution, raising the debt ceiling, cutting spending, as soon as either political party has all three branches of government, the executive branch, the presidential branch. Well, I'm not talking, no, I said that wrong. They have the two branches of Congress, okay? The bicameral, House, right? The legislature. They have the Senate majority, House majority, and the presidency. They'll be able to get whatever spending they want, and both parties have done that. They've pushed through their spending priorities. So this is why investors like gridlock when there's neither party is in total control, because this way they can't really get done these big spending priorities. And investors like that. There's not a lot of changes in the tax code, for example, that throw people off, that make people wonder what's going to happen. So this is why you hear gridlock's good for the market. Obviously, we don't want a debt ceiling problem. If we do, I'm of the belief that we will get through it. We could have a couple of tough market for a short amount of time, but everybody will be made whole. Bondholders, Treasury securities holders will be made whole. Federal employees will be made whole. And in a year or two, we'll have something else to worry about. We'll get past this. And I don't want people making drastic decisions because they're scared. We like to talk about a news event, a geopolitical event, like this is it. This is the only date that counts. And everything after that forever and ever depends on this one single date. It's never like that. It never happens. So just chill out. We'll be fine. We'll get through this. I'm telling you, we'll be okay. And it's not like everybody gets laid off the next day and the lights won't go on. I think there's a lot of hyperbole. Can you believe it? People trying to frighten you into thinking one way or the other. Can you believe that? I could never imagine that happening. All right, so that's the debt ceiling. We're still talking about it. Maybe it knocks the market off a little bit tomorrow, but I don't think so. I'm of the belief that we could hit new highs in the market by the end of the year because inflation's coming down and corporations are lean and mean and the Fed could stop cutting rates. Listen, I know what you're thinking, but with the economy is this, the economy is that. What does the economy have to do with the S&P 500? The S&P 500 companies, for the most part, are not really that affected by so many of the things that you're hearing about in the news about the economy. But what about employment? Facebook, other big tech companies, they're leading the charge to lay people off. And every time they lay people off, those stocks go up, not down. What about Nike? Consumer spending. Nike sells stuff. They sell sneakers to, 11-year-olds to 30-year-olds. Like I'm 55. Nike doesn't give a crap about me. I'm not buying $150 sneakers. My kids, that's a different story. Okay. I'm not Nike's main client anymore. So, and that's as far as consumer discretionary spending goes, people might cut back on things, but they're not cutting back equally in everything. They'll still buy their Nike sneakers. That's as an example. That's what I think. This is not a forecast for buying or for the revenues and earnings of Nike stock. I just have to say, just give you an example. Okay. Is that okay? Can we move on from that already? All right. Thank you. So anyway, the S&P 500 companies, they're not so worried about credit. I mean, if there's a credit crunch, Walmart and Target benefit from that, don't they? These people have to step down in their stores and have to shop at those other big box stores. I really am not so worried. In fact, personally for me, I'm not changing one single thing about my investing and financial plan because of the debt ceiling. Not one iota. Nothing. Nothing changes for me. And if something's changing for you because of this, you're doing it all wrong, I think. Because obviously, if you need cash over the near term and you're worried about the market going down and that money you need is in the market, then you should worry and you should do the right thing and make sure the cash you need for the next year or so is in cash, not in the stock market, right? The market's volatile. So that's what we have to do. That's what my clients do. You know, it's called being proactive. It's not that hard to do, and it's kind of fun. Yeah, you know, being proactive is like fun. So moving on, let's talk about the national debt, okay? Because you're going to hear, well, why should we pay the national debt? We should pay our federal workers, blah, blah. Why are we paying foreigners to hold their national debt? Okay, let me just tell you, the national debt is about 30% held by foreigners. 70% of it is held by U.S. citizens. Social Security owns like 25% of it. The Federal Reserve owns a ton of it. Mutual funds own a ton of U.S. treasuries. Again, about 30%. And of the foreign holders, the biggest foreign holder of U.S. treasuries is Japan. Then, almost like a distant second, is China. So when you hear somebody use this as a political football and says, well, why are we paying China? We should be paying ourselves. No, China does not hold the boatload, not even close, of U.S. treasuries. The boatload of U.S. treasuries is held by your fellow Americans. So don't let anybody try to scare you like that, okay? You should know these things. So when somebody says, misrepresents things, you're going to know, all right? Okay, here's what I said to a client. Dear friend of mine, my dad, I have to just throw quick credit to my late father. He once said, Bitch, you don't really know somebody until you do business with them. And boy, was he ever right. And I have a client. He's a dear friend, high 60s, a true example of what it's like to be a wonderful son, husband, and father, and friend, and brother, and uncle. So he asked me a question, and we talk, you know, and I love talking. He's just become a good friend, his wife too. So we're talking, and what do we talk about? Oh yeah, the value of his account, you know, and it's a nice size value. It's kind of toward the highest it's ever been. A little bit of fluctuation. He remarked how stable it's been, and I'm like, yeah, because it's been a very steady year, a lot of low volatility this year. But he's worried about his account. You know, he's coming up to his required minimum distributions in a couple of years. He's lucky like that. He hasn't had to take money out of his IRA yet because smart. You know, he's just been very smart like that. And he's moved. I'm not saying you're not smart if you have to take RMDs. He's just the way he planned it. Him and his wife can put this off until they actually hit the age of required minimum distributions. The age of required minimum distributions. All right, trying to. What is that? The age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius. So he is at the point where he's got to start taking them in a couple of years, and he wants to know, maybe I should be doing something now. I would be upset if my account went down a lot. And I'm like, look, you could feel better now about doing something like taking risk off the table, selling, going to cash altogether. But your biggest fear should be inflation over the next 20 to 25 years. That's a bigger fear. Secondly, are you worried about your overall portfolio, or are you worried about your cash needs over the next year or two? And that's what I said that was so smart. The way I said is, like, are you worried about the portion of your portfolio that's already in cash for your RMDs coming up, or whatever financial obligation you have coming up near term? Or are you worried about the overall value of your portfolio? And when you separate those two, it gives you such clarity in terms of taking the worry away because you're doing things right. That's what I wanted to share with you. Let that sink in. I hope it works for you because I feel like that was such a good explainer. I'm going to get going, and I hope you guys have a really good rest of the day. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll see what the latest news is about the budget ceiling. All right? Have a great day.